Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome here to our wonderful Gilbert White's house and oats collection. It's well, we couldn't have better weather for it, and we're here really for a very special unveiling of the man behind all of this, Gilbert White, who's 300 years old and a bit now, because that was a few days ago. And I know, as a relatively new chairman, very little about really anything, which is why they asked me to be chairman, I'm sure. But what I do know is that this chap, who you'll see very shortly, I would like to think of as the sort of grandfather of climate and environmental concern. He was looking at things, recording things so many years ago before anyone had any real worries or even knowledge, and probably even care about what was going on. And they say that Darwin said he stood on the shoulders of Gilbert White when he did all of his work. So he's a very important man, and I'm really pleased and very honoured to be part of this organisation now. We're only a small group because, for obvious reasons, we're still socially distancing and bound by the rules, and there are many more people that we would have liked to have invited today, and we hope to have a better party when time and conditions allow. But we've got very important people here today, particularly the friends of the museum, and also Damon and Sandra de Laszlo. Damon's there, Sandra is there, who stumped up, frankly, because these statues don't come cheap. They are important things, especially if you want to get them right, and if you want to get really one of the best sculptors going. And we were very pleased to have Peter Lyle Robinson, known as Lyle to his friends. Where's Peter? Behind me. Behind me, there he is. That we've got him here. Now, Dr. Groves, or actually to give her a married name, Dr. Irwin, has done fantastic things here, and we are really rather set fair to do very well in the future. And although this is about Gilbert, you'll see from the plaque on the back of the bench here that it also celebrates the life and times also of Rosie. And we had no idea that she was going to die on the 23rd of June, but I hope she's with us now in spirit. And we're very pleased to have her husband, Richard. There he is. Richard is doing an impression with Lord Selborne of Roosevelt and Churchill. Next to be seen. Can you come every day through the summer? Actually, that's going to be quite a draw too. And we've also got Ed here, Rosie's son. So we're very pleased to see you here before you get off back to California. So I hope we'll see this as part of the rebirth of everything that's going on here. So it's been very difficult for us in the last 3 months. I'd like to pay particular tribute to our directors. We've got Judith here and Steve over there, who have worked tirelessly under, it has to be said, the thumb of us trustees, who've also been meeting every fortnight to try and get us through. So we meet by Zoom, but it's far more meetings than any trustee ever signed up for. But I do think it's resulted in the fact that we now are very well placed, and we've got the gardens, as you have seen, already open, and we hope next week, and certainly by the 1st of August, to have the house itself back open again, once we've worked out just how people can get round safely and within all the rules. So we are set fair, it's looking very good, and I'm very, very pleased that we've got such a great day on which to sort of kick things off with our rebirth, as it were. So I'd like now to hand over to Alan Titchbath, my fellow Deputy Lieutenant in Hampshire, and he will do the great unveiling.
Oh, the great unveiling. Thank you, Carol, very much. I could speak and then unveil him, but it seems the wrong way round, because I'd rather like to be in his presence while I talk about him, rather than leaving him like a canary in a cage. So when I uncover him, will you give the first round of applause, then we'll have another one at the end. So, Gilbert White. There you are. You know, my son-in-law is I have 2 sons-in-law. They're both shorter than me. I'm only 5'8.5". And I said something at one point to one of my sons-in-law about relative heights, and he turned to me and said in a very loud voice, "I have no problem with my stature." And I thought, fair enough, that's okay. That was before he married my daughter. We get on like house on fire. Good stuff, I have learned, and persuaded people, comes in very small packages. You may wonder, you don't, people may wonder, what on earth an 18th century clergyman can contribute to the way we live today with technology and cyberspace and all kinds of things which are so far divorced from swallows perched on homes and a notebook. But we only got there because of the likes of Gilbert White doing what he did, asking questions, doing what for many at his time of life, in his period, was unusual, and he studied live animals rather than dead ones that were taken apart and painted. Beatrix Potter, you may remember, had people bring dead animals to her so she could draw Peter Rabbit, things like that. Gilbert was amazing because he had this phrase, he observed narrowly. And that means sitting, looking, taking time, going out, watching. Now you could argue, as a clergyman, he only worked one day a week anyway, so he probably had plenty of time to do that. But the fact is he did it, and he decided it was published in 1789, this astonishing book called The Natural History of Selborne, which was his observations and also the observations and correspondence between two very learned gentlemen amateurs, I suppose you might call them, Thomas Pennant and Daines Barrington. It seems such a dusty old tome when you say The Natural History of Selborne by the Reverend Gilbert White. Anybody who opens it up is immediately transported to a time of valued observation, observing narrowly. And it's thanks to White that, as Carly says, the likes of Darwin, who, as he said, stood on his shoulders, began to work out how things worked. The thing is, we still don't really know. Holding a swallow, wonderful. In those days, they weren't sure what happened to swallows in the wintertime. Did they migrate to warmer climes? White suggested that was the case before anybody knew. Some thought they hibernated over winter in caves or even at the bottom of ponds, because in spring they were suddenly seen skimming across a pond. Had they been holding their breath for 6 months? Of course not. But this man left us a legacy which we would do well to pick up and run with today, particularly in case of our children and grandchildren. Finding time to stop and look. And fortuitously, over the last 4 months, we've had plenty of time to stop and look. And for me, a gardener, it's kind of been reassuring that perhaps people understand more of why I do what I do. Because so many people say, my garden's never looked as good. But I hope also that on a daily basis, watching your garden, you've learnt about plants and insects and birds and mammals, and you've spotted them. And it's not just a case of learning and writing it down, because a lot has been achieved in the 300 years since Gilbert was born in terms of our knowledge. But a man called Robert Byron wrote a poem which listed flowers, butterflies, bees, all of which, if he had a son, he wanted him to know. And he said at the end of it, it will give him a content with the universe, a content, an understanding, a realization, something that makes your soul sing. And that's why I started out when I was 8, growing things and being a gardener. Gilbert was a great gardener as well as a naturalist. He grew potatoes, quite rare then, in spite of the fact that Raleigh had brought them back in 1500. He was growing them and eating them. There were probably only cattle fodder before Gilbert decided to give the nation the chip. He grew sweet corn, he grew sea kale, and even crops which need too much heat to grow outdoors in Britain. He grew melons. He made a straw-baled framework, a frame inside, ploughed manure into it, got the heat. And I have at the moment in my greenhouse at home 3 melons fattening up. Gilbert grew 200 and putting me firmly in my place. He was a man who set us off on this great voyage of discovery. And now, thanks to Rosemary, the amount of volunteers that the Wakes has always had, keeping up its garden and the house itself, we have an example here for all those who follow. That observing narrowly leads to advances still in our understanding of nature and our understanding of and respect for the planet. Last weekend I have a little house on the Isle of Wight, and I took over my daughter and two little boys, and the 8-year-old has a butterfly net that I gave him 2 years ago. And he loves catching butterflies. Doesn't want to do anything with them, just catch them and look at them and then let them go. And we made a note on my iPhone of all the ones we found on Saturday morning, from meadow browns to ringlets and gatekeepers. And just as we were leaving, I told him the story of the clouded yellow, a glorious butterfly, brighter yellow than a brimstone, with black markings on its forewings. And I told him this story, and he thought the name was lovely, Clouded Yellow. We were looking at our gazillionth gatekeeper, or I was, on this path on the coast near Thorness Bay, and just about to come home because we'd been told to pick the girls up from the car park because they'd done some shopping. And as I turned, he said, "Look, Grandpa!" And there in the field, on a thistle, was a clouded yellow butterfly. Bright yellow. Once in every 10 years, we get a clouded yellow year where they come over from Europe in their thousands. We saw one, but we saw it. He's remembered the name, and he's going to write it down in his little diary when he goes back to school. So that was my way of saying thank you to Gilbert, who started us off on this quest to learn more about the world in which we live. By learning more, we understand it more, we respect it more, and we cherish it more. And when you look up there at the Hannah, turn round, have a look up there. No two greens are the same. And in there, wildlife, not always pretty, not a creepy crawlies, but things which keep this planet going while everybody else is doing things with satellites and keyboards and screens. It's important. It is the way forward. But we must not lose sight of what Gilbert White bequeathed to us, and that's a love, a fascination for natural history, which can make the souls of adults, children and grandchildren sing. Thank you, Gilbert. Happy birthday.
Well done.